Have you ever pondered the mysteries of heaven, the unseen battles in the spiritual realm, or what truly transpired before humanity's first breath? If these questions stir your soul, then you're part of a chosen generation seeking truth beyond the surface. I invite you to join us on this journey of revelation by liking this content, subscribing to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and leaving a comment with 777 to share your thoughts. Your voice matters, and together we can uncover the profound truths that shape our lives. Today, we embark on a story that pierces the heart, a tale, not of triumph, but of tragedy, a narrative that reveals the devastating cost of silence within a family. This is the story of Tamar, the only daughter of King David, whose life was shattered by betrayal, and whose father's silence amplified her pain. It's a story that resonates across centuries, offering timeless lessons about family, leadership, and the courage to speak when silence becomes a weapon. Let us step back in time to Jerusalem, 1,000 years before Christ, where the grand palace of King David stood as a beacon of Israel's glory. David, the shepherd boy who slew Goliath, the poet whose psalms still echo in our hearts, and the king who expanded Israel's borders like no other, was a man after God's own heart. Yet within the stone walls of his palace, a storm was brewing up. Storm born not of external enemies but of internal failures. This is not a tale of David's victories over giants or nations, but of his greatest defeat, his failure as a father to protect his daughter Tamar. The scriptures, in their timeless wisdom, reveal a family dynamic as complex as it is tragic. David's household was vast, with multiple wives and concubines, a common practice for monarchs of the time. This structure, while culturally accepted, sowed seeds of rivalry and tension among his children. Sons like Amnon, the firstborn, known for his charisma, and daughters like Tamar, a virtuous princess, lived under the weight of royal expectations and maternal ambitions. The palace, meant to be a sanctuary, became a stage for a tragedy that would shake the kingdom to its core. The story begins with a seemingly ordinary moment in the royal household, but beneath the surface, subtle cracks were forming. David's family was a tapestry of competing loyalties, with each child carrying the hopes of their mother's lineage. Amnon, as the heir apparent, held a position of privilege, his influence unmatched among his siblings. Absalom, with his striking beauty and magnetic presence, was already showing signs of the ambition that would later define him. And Tamar, described in the second book of Samuel as a beautiful virgin, lived a life of purity and protection, as was customary for royal daughters. Yet, the scriptures hint at an undercurrent of unrest. The family structure, with its many mothers and half-siblings, created an environment ripe for jealousy and division. As Proverbs 22:3 warns, the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. David, preoccupied with the demands of his kingdom, seemed to overlook the dangerous dynamics unfolding under his roof. His discernment, so sharp in matters of state, faltered when it came to his own children. This narrative is not merely a historical account. It is a mirror reflecting the challenges faced by families today. How often do we, like David, excel in our public roles yet fail to see the warning signs within our own homes? The scriptures teach us in Deuteronomy 6:6-7 to diligently teach our children, to speak of God's precepts at home, on the road, when lying down, and when rising up. But David, despite his spiritual sensitivity, appeared to lose sight of this responsibility. The palace, with its grandeur and busyness, became a place where children grew isolated, forming their own circles of influence. Amnon's entourage, Absalom's followers, and the absence of close parental oversight created a fertile ground for tragedy. The presence of Jonadab, David's nephew and a cunning advisor to Amnon, further complicated the dynamic. Described as a very shrewd man, Jonadab's influence would prove catastrophic, exploiting the vulnerabilities within David's family. As we delve into this story, we are confronted with a sobering truth: even the most anointed leaders can falter when it comes to family. David's life was marked by extraordinary faith. His psalms, like Psalm 23, proclaim a God who leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. Yet, in his own household, David walked through a valley of his own making, blinded by the demands of his kingdom and the complexity of his family. The scriptures remind us, in Psalm 127:1, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." A house divided by rivalry, unchecked ambition, and neglect cannot stand. no matter how great its builder. This story challenges us to examine our own families. Are we vigilant in nurturing open communication? Do we recognize the subtle signs of discord before they escalate? The tragedy of Tamar is not just a tale of ancient Israel. It is a warning for us today, urging us to break the silence that can destroy the ones we love. The stage was set for a tragedy that would unfold with devastating precision. Amnon's obsession with his half-sister Tamar, as recorded in the second book of Samuel 13-2, was not a fleeting desire but a consuming sickness. The scriptures describe him as so distressed that he became physically ill, his heart twisted by a forbidden longing. This was not love, but a perversion of it, a lust that sought to possess rather than protect. The presence of Jonadab, the cunning advisor, turned this dangerous desire into a calculated plan. Jonadab's suggestion was deceptively simple. Pretend to be ill, request Tamar's care, and exploit her kindness. The plan, rooted in manipulation, preyed on the trust and customs of the time, where a sister caring for her sick brother was an act of familial duty. David, unaware of the malice behind the request, sent Tamar to Amnon's quarters, unwittingly placing his daughter in the path of danger. This moment in the narrative is a stark reminder of the power of influence within a family. Role as an enabler highlights how ill-intentioned advisors can exploit vulnerabilities. The scriptures warn us in Proverbs 27-12, "The prudent sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." David's failure to question Amnon's request, to discern the underlying intent, reflects a lapse in vigilance that would have catastrophic consequences. As parents and leaders, we are called to be gatekeepers, discerning the influences that surround our children. The tragedy of Tamar began not with the act of violence, but with the subtle manipulations that went unnoticed. This story compels us to ask, who are the voices speaking into our families? Are we fostering an environment where truth and accountability prevail, or are we, like David, too distracted to see the danger? As we close this first section, let us reflect on the weight of silence. Tamar's story is a call to action, urging us to speak up, to protect, and to nurture our families with wisdom and vigilance. The scriptures remind us in Isaiah 42:31 that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength, soaring on wings like eagles. May we find the strength to break the silence, to guard our households, and to lead with the courage David lacked. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, perhaps a 777, if this story has stirred your heart. Like and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today to join us as we continue this journey, uncovering the lessons that can transform our families and restore peace. Let us move forward, not in silence, but in the pursuit of truth and healing. What is the true cost of silence when it cloaks a wound so deep that it fractures the very soul of a family? Imagine a palace, grand and resplendent, where the echoes of a king's triumphs mingle with the silent cries of a daughter's despair. This is not a tale of conquest or glory, but a journey into the heart of a tragedy that could have been prevented, a tragedy born from unchecked desires, manipulative counsel, and a father's failure to act. As we continue the story of Tamar, David's only daughter, we delve deeper into the moments that led to her devastation, uncovering the warning signs that went unnoticed and the lessons that resonate with us today. If this journey stirs your heart, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Together, let us seek the wisdom to protect our families from the silent storms that threaten to tear them apart. In the grand halls of Jerusalem's royal palace, 1,000 years before Christ, King David reigned as a man of unparalleled achievement. His psalms, like those in Psalm 18, proclaim a God who delivers and strengthens, a God who equipped David to defeat giants and expand Israel's borders from Dan to Beersheba. Yet, within the walls of his own home, a different kind of battle was unfolding, one not fought with swords or spears, but with the subtle weapons of neglect and deception. David's family was a complex tapestry, woven from multiple wives and concubines, each bearing children with their own ambitions and allegiances. Amnon, the firstborn, held a position of privilege, his path to the throne seemingly secure. Absalom, with his striking beauty and charisma, carried the seeds of rebellion. And Tamar, a virtuous princess, lived in the sheltered world of royal daughters, her beauty and purity a treasure meant to be protected. But the scriptures, in their unyielding honesty, revealed that this family, despite its divine favor, was not immune to the frailties of human nature. The second book of Samuel 13:2-1 introduces us to the pivotal moment where the threads of this tragedy begin to unravel. Amnon, David's firstborn, became consumed by an unhealthy obsession with his half-sister Tamar. The scriptures describe his longing as so intense that it made him physically ill, a sickness not of the body but of the soul. This was not love, as the world might define it, but a distorted desire that sought to possess what was forbidden. The palace, with its bustling activity and competing loyalties, provided the perfect environment for such a desire to fester unnoticed. David, burdened by the demands of his kingdom, seemed to lose sight of the dynamics among his children. As Proverbs 14:12 warns, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death." Amnon's path, driven by lust and unchecked by accountability, was leading toward destruction, not only for himself, but for his entire family. Enter Nadab, David's nephew and Amnon's confidant, described in the second book of Samuel 13:3, as a very shrewd man. His presence in the narrative is a chilling reminder of how destructive influences can infiltrate even the most sacred spaces. Seeing Amnon's distress, Jonadab inquired, "Why are you, the king's son, so haggard morning after morning?" His question, seemingly innocent, opened the door to a plan as cunning as it was cruel. Instead of guiding Amnon toward righteousness, Jonadab proposed a scheme to exploit Tamar's kindness and the customs of the time. "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill," he advised, "and when your father comes to see you, ask for your sister Tamar to come and prepare food for you." 2 Samuel 13:5. This plan was a masterstroke of manipulation, preying on the trust inherent in familial bonds and David's unsuspecting nature. It reveals a profound truth. The greatest threats to a family often come not from external enemies, but from within, cloaked in familiarity. The scriptures paint a vivid picture of how this plan unfolded. Amnon, feigning illness, requested Tamar's presence, and David, unaware of the malice behind the request, complied. Tamar, obedient and compassionate, entered her brother's quarters with no reason to suspect danger. She prepared food in his presence, her actions reflecting the purity and care of a devoted sister. But the mask of Amnon's illness soon fell away. In a moment that would shatter her life, he seized her and demanded, "Come, lie with me, my sister." 2 Samuel 13:11. Tamar's response was immediate and courageous, revealing not only her virtue but her wisdom. "No, my brother," she pleaded, "do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing." To Samuel 13:12. She appealed to morality, to the laws of their faith, and even suggested that Amnon speak to the king, a desperate attempt to escape the trap. But Amnon, consumed by his obsession, would not listen. The scriptures state, being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. To Samuel 13:14. This act of violence was not the end of Tamar's suffering, but the beginning of a deeper wound. The scriptures reveal a chilling shift in Amnon's heart. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. 2 Samuel 13:15. In a final act of cruelty, he expelled her from his presence, casting her out as if she were the one at fault. Tamar, devastated, tore her robe of many colors, symbol of her royal status and purity, and covered herself with ashes, a public declaration of her grief and shame. To Samuel 13:19. Her cries echoed through the palace, a haunting testament to the betrayal she had endured. This moment is a stark reminder of the cost of unchecked sin. As Ecclesiastes 7:26 warns, "I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are chains. Whoever pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her." Amnon, ensnared by his own desires, became the architect of his family's ruin. What makes this tragedy even more heart-wrenching is David's response or lack thereof. The scriptures tell us, when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. To Samuel 13:21. Anger, yes, but action, none. David, the warrior who faced Goliath, the king who judged with wisdom, stood silent in the face of his daughter's violation. Some scholars suggest that David's inaction may have stemmed from his own past, guilt, his sin with Bathsheba, and the subsequent death of their child. To Samuel 12:10-11. Perhaps he felt unworthy to judge Amnon, or perhaps the complexity of his role as both father and king paralyzed him. Whatever the reason, his silence was a second betrayal. leaving Tamar desolate and without justice. As Proverbs 21:15 declares, when justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers. David's failure to act not only denied Tamar justice, but emboldened further chaos within his family. This silence is the heart of the tragedy, a silence that speaks louder than words. It is a reminder that leadership, whether in a kingdom or a household, demands courage to confront wrongdoing. Psalm 82:3-4 calls us to give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Tamar, afflicted and destitute, found no such justice in her father. Her isolation in Absalom's house, as recorded in 2 Samuel 13:20, paints a picture of a life reduced to shadows, her potential crushed by the weight of trauma. The palace, meant to be her refuge, became her prison. This narrative challenges us to examine our own families. Are we creating spaces where our children feel safe to speak? Are we vigilant in addressing wrongdoing? Or do we, like David, allow our past mistakes to silence our present responsibilities? As we reflect on this second chapter of Tamar's story, let us consider the power of our actions or inaction. The scriptures remind us in James 4:17, "So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." David's silence was not merely a passive omission, it was a failure that rippled through his family, planting seeds of vengeance and further tragedy. Yet, there is hope. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This promise invites us to break the cycle of silence, to act with courage, and to protect those entrusted to us. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. Let us move forward, not in silence, but in the pursuit of justice and healing, ensuring that our families are sanctuaries of love and truth. What happens when the silence of those meant to protect becomes a catalyst for vengeance, tearing apart the very bonds that should unite a family? Picture a royal palace, its grandeur masking a growing darkness, where a daughter's cries go unanswered, and a brother's rage festers in quiet calculation. This is the story of Tamar, David's only daughter, whose tragedy was not just her violation but the ripple effect of silence that followed, sowing seeds of retribution. As we journey deeper into this narrative, we uncover the consequences of inaction and the lessons that echo through time, urging us to break the silence in our own homes. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us explore how a father's failure and a brother's vengeance reshaped a kingdom, and what we can learn to safeguard our families from similar devastation. In the aftermath of Tamar's violation, the royal palace in Jerusalem, once a symbol of David's triumphs, became a crucible of unspoken pain. The scriptures, in their unflinching clarity, revealed the devastating impact of Amnon's crime against his half-sister Tamar, her torn robe and ashes, as described in the second book of Samuel 13:19, were not just signs of personal grief, but a public declaration of a family fractured. Tamar, once a princess of promise, was reduced to living desolate in her brother Absalom's house. To Samuel 13:20. The palace, meant to be a haven of protection, had become a place of isolation for her. David, the king whose psalms sang of God's justice and mercy, learned of his daughter's suffering and was very angry. 2 Samuel 13:21. Yet, his anger produced no action, no justice, no restoration. This silence, more deafening than any proclamation, set the stage for a tragedy that would engulf his entire household. David's inaction is a pivotal moment in this narrative, a moment that challenges us to consider the weight of responsibility in leadership, especially within the family. As a king, David had the authority to punish Amnon, to restore dignity to Tamar, and to set a precedent of justice. As a father, he had the duty to protect his daughter and guide his sons. Yet, he did neither. The scriptures offer no explicit reason for his paralysis, but some scholars suggest that David's own past, his sin with Bathsheba, and the subsequent death of their child, to Samuel 12:10-11, may have left him feeling unqualified to judge. The prophet Nathan had warned that the sword would never depart from David's house, a prophecy that seemed to unfold with chilling precision. But this prophecy was not an excuse for inaction, it was a call to greater vigilance. As Psalm 51:10, penned by David himself, pleads, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." David's failure to act suggests a heart burdened by guilt, unable to rise to the demands of his role as a father. The silence that followed Tamar's tragedy was not universal. While David remained passive, Absalom, Tamar's full brother, harbored a different kind of silence, one not of inaction but of calculated resolve. The scriptures tell us Absalom spoke to Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. 2 Samuel 13:22. This was a silence pregnant with intent, a storm gathering strength over 2 years. Absalom's hatred was not impulsive. It was a fire that burned steadily, fueled by the injustice done to his sister and the absence of paternal intervention. As Proverbs Death warns, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. Absalom's hatred, left unchecked by any attempt at reconciliation or justice, set the stage for a calculated act of vengeance that would further fracture David's family. Absalom's plan, as recorded in the second book of Samuel 13:23-29, was as cunning as it was ruthless. He organized a sheep-shearing festival, a time of celebration in ancient Israel, and invited all the king's sons, including Amnon, knowing David was unlikely to attend. Absalom specifically insisted on Amnon's presence, saying, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us to Samuel 13:26. The request seemed innocent, even fraternal, but it masked a deadly intent. During the feast, when Amnon was merry with wine to Samuel 13:28, Absalom gave the order to his servants, "Strike Amnon and kill him. Do not be afraid." The execution was swift, and the other princes, fearing for their lives, fled. In panic, the initial report that reached David was exaggerated, claiming that Absalom had killed all the king's sons. 2 Samuel 13:30. Jonadab, the same cunning advisor who had enabled Amnon's crime, clarified that only Amnon was dead to Samuel 13:32, but the damage was done. The royal family was now marked by death, exile, and division. This sequence of events underscores a profound truth: silence in the face of injustice breeds further destruction. Ecclesiastes 8:11 warns, "Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil." David's failure to address Amnon's crime created a vacuum of authority, which Absalom filled with his own brand of justice. His actions, while driven by a sense of loyalty to Tamar, were not righteous but vengeful, perpetuating a cycle of violence. The scriptures remind us in Romans 12:19, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." Absalom's decision to take matters into his own hands reflects a failure of faith in divine justice, a failure compounded by David's inaction. The palace, once a place of unity, became a battleground where brother turned against brother. David's reaction to Amnon's death reveals the complexity of his heart as a father. The scriptures describe him tearing his garments and lying on the ground. To Samuel 13:31, a sign of profound grief. Yet, even in his mourning, there is a sense of inevitability, as if David recognized that his earlier silence had contributed to this outcome. The loss of Amnon was not just the death of a son, but the culmination of a series of failures: failure to supervise, failure to discipline, failure to protect. Psalm 34:18 offers comfort, stating, "The Lord is near to the broken-hearted, and saves the crushed in spirit." David's broken heart, however, was not enough to undo the consequences of his choices. Absalom, now a fugitive, fled to Geshur, where he remained for 3 years. 2 Samuel 13:38. The scriptures note that David longed to go to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, since he was dead. To Samuel 13:39. This longing reveals a father's love, but also his inability to bridge the chasm that had grown within his family. The tragedy of Tamar and its aftermath is a mirror for our own lives, reflecting the dangers of silence and the importance of leadership within the family. David's failures, his lack of vigilance, his paralysis in crisis, and his inability to foster open communication created an environment where sin flourished and justice. What does it mean to lead a family when the weight of past mistakes threatens to silence the present? Imagine a king, celebrated for his courage and wisdom, standing at the crossroads of his family's ruin, his heart torn between grief and inaction. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is not merely a tale of betrayal and vengeance, but a profound exploration of leadership failures within the sacred space of family. As we delve into this fourth chapter, we uncover the ripple effects of David's silence, the exile of Absalom, and the lessons that challenge us to confront our own shortcomings as protectors of those we love. If this journey stirs your soul, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us explore how a father's inaction can fracture a household and what we can do to build families rooted in vigilance and grace. The royal palace in Jerusalem, once a symbol of David's divine favor, had become a stage for tragedy. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, followed by David's deafening silence, had set off a chain reaction of devastation. Absalom, Tamar's brother, took justice into his own hands, orchestrating Amnon's death at a sheep-shearing festival. 2 Samuel 13:28-29. The swift and brutal act sent shockwaves through the royal family, with the other princes fleeing in fear and David receiving the exaggerated report that all his sons were dead. To Samuel 13:30. Jonadab, the cunning advisor who had enabled Amnon's crime, clarified that only Amnon had been killed. To Samuel 13:32, but the damage was irreparable. Absalom, now a murderer, fled to Geshur, where he remained in exile for 3 years. 2 Samuel 13:38. The scriptures paint a picture of a family unraveling, not through external conquest, but through internal failures that began with a father's silence. David's response to Amnon's death reveals the complexity of his heart. The scriptures describe him tearing his garments and lying on the ground. To Samuel 13:31, a visceral expression of grief for his firstborn. Yet, this mourning was layered with the weight of his own inaction. David had known of Tamar's violation and done nothing, allowing the seeds of vengeance to take root in Absalom's heart. The second book of Samuel 13:39 notes that David longed to go to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon since he was dead. This longing reflects a father's love, but also a profound disconnection. David's heart yearned for his exiled son, yet he made no move to reconcile or address the deeper wounds within his family. As Psalm 147:3 declares, he heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. But healing requires action, confession, and restoration steps David seemed unable to take. The exile of Absalom marks a new chapter in this tragedy, one that highlights the cost of unresolved conflict. For 3 years Absalom remained in Geshur, separated from his father and the palace that had once been his home. This period of exile was not just a physical separation but a spiritual and emotional chasm. The scriptures do not record any attempt by David to reach out to Absalom during this time, a silence that deepened the rift. Proverbs 15:1 reminds us, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." David's failure to offer any answer, soft or otherwise, allowed Absalom's resentment to fester, setting the stage for further rebellion. The palace, once a place of unity, had become a house divided, its members scattered by grief, guilt, and vengeance. This narrative compels us to examine the role of leadership within the family. David, a man chosen by God, was no stranger to leadership. His psalms, like Psalm 78-72, praise God's guidance. With upright heart he shepherded them and guided them with his skillful hand. Yet, in his own household, David's leadership faltered. His first mistake was a lack of vigilance. The scriptures teach us in 1 Samuel 16, "The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." David, who had been chosen for his heart, failed to discern the dark intentions within his own family. Amnon's obsession, Jonadab's cunning, and Absalom's growing anger were all signs that went unnoticed or unaddressed. As parents and leaders, we are called to be watchful, to see beyond the surface and address the heart of our children's struggles. David's second mistake was his paralysis in the face of crisis. When Tamar was violated, the scriptures note his anger but no action. To Samuel 13:21. As a king, he had the authority to administer justice. As a father, he had the responsibility to protect his daughter. Yet, he did neither. Proverbs 21:15 declares, "When justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers." David's inaction not only denied Tamar justice, but emboldened Absalom to take matters into his own hands. This failure reflects a deeper truth. Leadership requires courage to confront wrongdoing, even when it is painful or personal. David's past sin with Bathsheba, as recorded in 2 Samuel 12:10-11, may have left him feeling unworthy to judge, but his guilt was no excuse for abandoning his duty. As Psalm 32:5 confesses, "I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin." Forgiveness is available, but it demands action to prevent further harm. The third mistake, perhaps the most subtle yet devastating, was David's failure to foster open communication within his family. The scriptures show a household where children formed their own factions: Amnon with his entourage, Absalom with his followers, and Tamar isolated in her purity. When Tamar was violated, she had no safe space to seek justice from her father. When Absalom planned his revenge, there was no dialogue to prevent further violence. Proverbs 29:15 warns, "The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother." David's lack of discipline and engagement created an environment where destructive impulses flourished. As parents, we are called to create spaces where our children can speak freely, where their pain is heard, and where their actions are guided by love and wisdom. The exile of Absalom and the silence that followed reveal a family in crisis, but they also offer lessons for us today. The scriptures remind us in Ephesians 6:2-4, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." David's passivity provoked Absalom's anger, not through harshness but through neglect. This story challenges us to examine our own families. Are we creating environments where our children feel seen and heard? Are we addressing conflicts before they escalate into crises? The tragedy of Tamar and Absalom is a warning that silence and inaction can lead to irreversible consequences, but it is also a call to action. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning. This restoration is possible when we choose to break the silence, to act with courage, and to lead with love. As we reflect on this chapter, let us consider the power of our choices. David's silence allowed a cycle of violence to continue, but we have the opportunity to choose differently. By fostering open communication, addressing wrongdoing, and seeking God's guidance, we can build families that stand firm against the storms of life. The scriptures encourage us in Proverbs 24:3-4, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." Let us build our homes with wisdom, not silence, and protect those entrusted to us. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in the shadow of silence, but in the light of God's truth and healing. What does it mean to long for reconciliation, yet remain paralyzed by the weight of past failures? Picture a king, his heart torn between love for his exiled son and the grief of a family shattered by violence and silence. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is a tapestry of betrayal, vengeance, and missed opportunities for restoration. As we enter this 5th chapter, we explore the years of Absalom's exile, the lingering silence of David, and the lessons that challenge us to bridge the divides within our own families. This narrative is not just a historical account, but a mirror reflecting the struggles of modern households, urging us to confront our failures with courage and seek healing through action. If this story stirs your heart, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's longing and a family's fracture can teach us to build homes rooted in forgiveness and vigilance. In the wake of Amnon's death, the royal palace in Jerusalem stood as a hollow monument to David's fractured family. The violation of Tamar had sparked a chain reaction: Absalom's calculated vengeance, the murder of his half-brother, and his subsequent flight to Geshur, where he remained in exile for 3 years. 2 Samuel 13:38. The scriptures paint a poignant picture of David's heart during this time. The spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, since he was dead. To Samuel 13:39. This longing reveals a father's love, a desire to mend what was broken, yet it is tinged with a profound passivity. David, the warrior who faced Goliath, and the poet whose psalms sang of God's mercy, remained silent, making no move to reconcile with his son or address the deeper wounds within his household. The palace, once a symbol of unity, had become a place of absence, its halls echoing with the ghosts of unspoken words. This period of exile is a critical juncture in the narrative, highlighting the cost of unresolved conflict and the danger of prolonged silence. Absalom's 3 years in Geshur were not merely a physical separation, but a deepening of the emotional and spiritual chasm between father and son. The scriptures do not record any attempt by David to reach out, to offer forgiveness, or to seek restoration. This silence, like his earlier inaction after Tamar's violation, perpetuated a cycle of division. Proverbs 17:1 reminds us, "Better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife." The royal household, despite its wealth and grandeur, was consumed by strife, its members scattered by guilt, anger, and unaddressed pain. David's longing for Absalom, while heartfelt, was not enough to heal the wounds that had festered since Tamar's tragedy. The scriptures offer a lens through which to view David's failures as a leader within his family. His first mistake, as we have seen, was a lack of vigilance, failing to discern the dangerous dynamics among his children. His second was his paralysis in the face of crisis, allowing Amnon's crime to go unpunished and Absalom's vengeance to take root. Now, in this period of exile, we see a third critical error: the failure to pursue reconciliation. David's longing for Absalom was genuine, but it lacked action. As Psalm 133:1 declares, "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity." Unity, however, requires effort, conversations, confessions, and a willingness to confront painful truths. David's silence during Absalom's exile suggests a heart burdened by guilt, perhaps still haunted by his own sin with Bathsheba, to Samuel 12:10-11, which the prophet Nathan had warned would bring a sword to his house. Yet, this prophecy was not a mandate for passivity, but a call to greater diligence in leading his family. Absalom's time in Geshur is a stark reminder of the consequences of unresolved conflict. The scriptures describe him as a man of remarkable beauty and charisma, 2 Samuel 14:25, qualities that would later fuel his rebellion. During his exile, Absalom's resentment likely grew, fed by the absence of his father's outreach and the memory of Tamar's unavenged suffering. The second book of Samuel does not detail Absalom's thoughts, but we can imagine a heart hardening with each passing year, his sense of justice twisting into ambition and defiance. Ecclesiastes 7:7 warns, "Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart." Absalom's exile, born of his act of vengeance, became a crucible for further rebellion, a path that might have been altered had David acted to restore his son. This narrative challenges us to consider the cost of delaying reconciliation within our own families. How often do we let pride, fear, or guilt prevent us from mending broken relationships? David's failure to act during this period reflects a deeper truth about leadership. It demands courage to confront not only external threats, but internal wounds. The scriptures teach us in Ephesians 4:26-27, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil." David's prolonged silence gave opportunity for the devil to sow discord, turning a father's longing into a family's ruin. As parents and leaders, we are called to be proactive, to address conflicts before they fester, and to create spaces where forgiveness and healing can flourish. Psalm 23:3, penned by David himself, proclaims, "He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Restoration is God's promise, but it requires our participation through honest dialogue, repentance, and the courage to act. The story of Tamar and Absalom also highlights the importance of communication within the family. David's household was marked by division, with children root at children forming their own factions, and no safe space for open dialogue. Tamar's cries went unheard by her father, and Absalom's anger found no outlet but vengeance. Proverbs 15:18 warns, "A hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention." David's failure to foster an environment where his children could express their pain or seek guidance created a void filled by destructive impulses. As modern families, we can learn from this tragedy by prioritizing regular moments of connection, family meals, shared activities, and honest conversations. Deuteronomy 6-7 instructs, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." These moments of teaching and talking build trust, ensuring that our homes are sanctuaries of truth and love. The exile of Absalom is a poignant reminder that time does not heal all wounds. it can deepen them if left unaddressed. The scriptures encourage us in Colossians 3:13, "As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive." Forgiveness and reconciliation are not passive acts but deliberate choices that require humility and action. David's longing for Absalom was a step toward healing, but without action, it remained unfulfilled, allowing the seeds of rebellion to grow. This story challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we holding on to grudges or delaying difficult conversations? Are we creating spaces where our loved ones feel safe to share their struggles? The tragedy of David's family teaches us that silence can be as destructive as violence, but it also offers hope. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning. This restoration is within reach when we choose to break the silence and act with love. As we close this chapter, let us reflect on the power of action over longing. David's silence prolonged his family's pain, but we can choose a different path. By fostering vigilance, pursuing reconciliation, and building open communication, we can protect our families from the cycles of strife that plagued David's house. Proverbs 24:3-4 reminds us, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." Let us build our homes with the wisdom of God's truth, ensuring they are places of healing and unity. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in silence, but in the pursuit of restoration and peace. Can a family fractured by silence and vengeance ever find its way back to wholeness? Envision a palace, its stone walls standing firm yet unable to contain the growing chasm within a royal household. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is a haunting reminder that even the most anointed leaders can falter, leaving wounds that ripple across generations. As we enter this 6th chapter, we explore the return of Absalom from exile, the fragile attempts at reconciliation, and the enduring lessons that call us to confront our failures with courage and faith. This narrative is not merely an ancient tragedy but a beacon, illuminating the path to restoration for families today. If this journey touches your heart, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's hesitancy and a son's unresolved anger can teach us to build homes grounded in forgiveness and vigilance. The royal palace in Jerusalem, once a symbol of David's divine favor, had become a hollow shell of its former glory. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, David's silence in the face of her suffering, and Absalom's vengeful murder of Amnon had torn the family apart. Absalom, having fled to Geshur for 3 years, lived in exile, separated from his father and the kingdom he once called home. To Samuel 13:38. The scriptures captured David's heart during this time. The spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, since he was dead. To Samuel 13:39. Yet, this longing remained unacted upon, a silent yearning that failed to bridge the divide. The absence of reconciliation during Absalom's exile set the stage for a return that would not heal but deepen the wounds within David's house. The 2nd book of Samuel 14 introduces a pivotal shift in the narrative, Absalom's return to Jerusalem. This moment was orchestrated not by David but by Joab, the commander of his army, who recognized the growing tension in the kingdom. Joab, understanding the need for resolution, devised a plan involving a wise woman from Tekoa to appeal to David's sense of justice. 2 Samuel 14:2-3. The woman presented a fabricated story of 2 brothers, one killed by the other, and pleaded for the surviving son's protection, mirroring David's situation with Absalom. Her words struck a chord. "Why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? For in giving this decision the king convicts himself, inasmuch as the king does not bring his banished one home again." To Samuel 14:13. Moved by her plea, David instructed Joab to bring Absalom back, but with a condition: let him dwell apart in his own house. He is not to come into my presence. 2 Samuel 14:24. This partial restoration reveals the complexity of David's heart. He allowed Absalom's return, yet his refusal to meet his son face to face was a continuation of the silence that had plagued his family. The scriptures note that Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing his father's face. To Samuel 14:28. This half-hearted reconciliation was no reconciliation at all. It was a bandage on a wound that needed surgery. As Psalm 85:10 declares, steadfast love and faithfulness meet, righteousness and peace kiss each other. True reconciliation requires both love and action. But David's hesitancy left Absalom in a limbo of rejection and resentment. The palace, meant to be a place of reunion, became a prison of unspoken grievances, setting the stage for eventual rebellion. Absalom's return was marked by his remarkable presence. The scriptures describe him as unmatched in beauty, with long, flowing hair and a charisma that captivated the people. 2 Samuel 14:25-26. Yet, beneath this exterior lay a heart hardened by years of exile and his father's continued distance. Absalom's frustration grew, culminating in a dramatic act. He set Joab's field on fire to force a confrontation. 2 Samuel 14:30. This bold move compelled Joab to arrange a meeting with David, and the scriptures record. So Absalom came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. And the king kissed Absalom, to Samuel 14:33. This kiss, a gesture of reconciliation, might seem like a turning point, but it was too little, too late. The years of silence and separation had already planted seeds of rebellion in Absalom's heart, seeds that would soon sprout into open defiance. This moment in the narrative underscores a critical lesson. Reconciliation delayed is reconciliation denied. David's failure to fully embrace Absalom upon his return reflects a deeper failure to address the root causes of his family's pain. The scriptures teach us in Colossians 3:13, "As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive." Forgiveness is not a passive act, but an intentional pursuit, requiring honest dialogue and a willingness to confront painful truths. David's partial restoration of Absalom, allowing his return, but withholding his presence, created an environment where resentment flourished. Proverbs 16:7 reminds us, "When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him." Had David sought God's guidance and acted with decisiveness, he might have turned Absalom's heart back to unity rather than rebellion. The story also highlights the importance of timing in family leadership. Ecclesiastes 3:7 declares, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak." David's silence was not the silence of wisdom but of avoidance, a refusal to engage with the pain of his children. Tamar's desolation, Absalom's exile, and now his estranged return were all consequences of this avoidance. As parents and leaders, we are called to discern the seasons of our families, to know when to speak, when to act, and when to seek reconciliation. The absence of open communication in David's household created a void filled by destructive impulses, from Amnon's lust to Absalom's vengeance and rebellion. Ephesians 4:29 instructs, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Our words, or the lack thereof, shape the course of our families. This narrative challenges us to examine our own homes. Are we delaying difficult conversations out of fear or guilt? Are we offering partial reconciliation instead of full restoration? The scriptures encourage us in Matthew 5:23-24. "If you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar, and go. First be reconciled to your brother." Reconciliation requires humility, courage, and a willingness to act before wounds deepen. David's failure to fully restore Absalom left his son vulnerable to the temptations of pride and ambition, paving the way for a rebellion that would shake the kingdom. As modern families, we can break this cycle by creating spaces for honest dialogue, addressing conflicts promptly, and seeking God's wisdom in every season. As we reflect on this chapter, let us consider the power of intentional action. David's half-hearted reconciliation with Absalom was a missed opportunity to heal his family. But we can choose differently, by fostering open communication, pursuing forgiveness, and acting with courage. We can build homes that reflect God's promise of restoration. Isaiah 61:3 offers hope, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning. This promise is ours when we break the silence and lead with love. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in the shadow of silence, but in the light of God's healing and grace, building families that stand as testaments to His faithfulness. What happens when the seeds of silence and half-hearted reconciliation sprout into rebellion, threatening to unravel not just a family but an entire kingdom? Picture a palace in Jerusalem, its halls once filled with the songs of a king's triumphs, now echoing with the tension of unresolved pain and growing defiance. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is a sobering reminder that a leader's failure to act can ignite a fire that consumes all they hold dear. As we enter this 7th chapter, we explore Absalom's rebellion, the culmination of David's silence, and the lessons that urge us to lead our families with wisdom and courage. This narrative is not merely a historical tragedy, but a call to action, challenging us to break the cycles of neglect and build homes rooted in God's truth. If this story stirs your soul, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's inaction and a son's ambition can teach us to protect our families from the storms of division. The royal palace, once a beacon of David's divine favor, had become a crucible of strife. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, David's silence in its aftermath, Absalom's vengeful murder of Amnon, and his 3-year exile in Geshur had fractured the royal family. To Samuel 13:38. Absalom's return to Jerusalem, orchestrated by Joab, was marked by a partial reconciliation. David allowed his son back but refused to see him for 2 years. 2 Samuel 14:24-28. When Absalom finally forced a meeting by setting Joab's field ablaze, David's kiss of reconciliation. To Samuel 14:33 was a fleeting gesture, unable to heal the deep wounds of neglect and resentment. Absalom, described as unmatched in beauty and charisma, 2 Samuel 14:25, carried within him a heart hardened by years of injustice and isolation. The scriptures now lead us to a darker chapter, Absalom's rebellion, a direct consequence of the silence that had plagued David's household. The 2nd book of Samuel 15 unveils Absalom's calculated bid for power. Standing at the city gate, he intercepted those seeking justice from the king, proclaiming, "Oh, that I would judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." 2 Samuel 15:4. With charm and cunning, Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. 2 Samuel 15:6. His rebellion was not a sudden act but a meticulously planned campaign, built on the foundation of his father's failures. David's silence after Tamar's violation and his hesitancy during Absalom's return had created a vacuum of authority, which Absalom filled with his own ambition. The scriptures reveal that after 4 years, Absalom declared himself king in Hebron, rallying supporters and igniting a civil war that forced David to flee Jerusalem. 2 Samuel 15:10-14. The palace, meant to be a sanctuary, became a battleground, its unity shattered by a son's defiance. This rebellion is a stark reminder of the consequences of unresolved conflict. David's failure to address Tamar's suffering, to punish Amnon, or to fully reconcile with Absalom, allowed resentment to fester into rebellion. Proverbs 18:19 warns, "A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle." Absalom's offense, rooted in his sister's violation and his father's inaction, became a fortress of defiance, impenetrable to reconciliation. The scriptures teach us in Psalm 55:12-14, a psalm attributed to David, "For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it, but it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend." David's anguish over Absalom's betrayal reflects the pain of a father betrayed by his own son, a pain made inevitable by his earlier silence. Absalom's rebellion also highlights the danger of charisma unchecked by accountability. His beauty and charm, while gifts, became tools of manipulation when guided by a wounded heart. The scriptures note that Absalom's appeal won over the people, but his actions were driven by pride and vengeance, not righteousness. As 1 Peter 5:8 warns, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." Absalom's unchecked ambition gave the enemy a foothold, turning his gifts into weapons against his own family. This narrative challenges us to examine the influences within our homes. Are we guiding our children's strengths with wisdom, or are we allowing their talents to be swayed by unresolved pain? As parents, we are called to shepherd our children. As David himself wrote in Psalm 78-72, With upright heart he shepherded them and guided them with his skillful hand. David's response to Absalom's rebellion reveals both his vulnerability and his resilience. Fleeing Jerusalem, he walked barefoot with his head covered, weeping as he ascended the Mount of Olives. To Samuel 15:30. This image of a humbled king contrasts sharply with the warrior who defeated Goliath, yet it reflects a heart still seeking God's mercy. Psalm 3, attributed to David during this flight, cries, "O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me, but you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head." Psalm 3:21-23. Even in exile, David's faith remained, but his failures as a father had led to this moment. His silence had not only failed Tamar, but had emboldened Absalom's rebellion, threatening the stability of the entire kingdom. This chapter of the narrative underscores 3 critical lessons for family leadership. First, vigilance is essential. David's failure to discern the dangerous dynamics among his children, Amnon's lust, Jonadab's cunning, Absalom's anger, allowed tragedy to unfold. Proverbs 27-23 instructs, "Know well the condition of your flocks, and give attention to your herds." As parents, we must know the condition of our children's hearts, addressing issues before they escalate. Second, justice must be swift and righteous. David's inaction after Tamar's violation created a void that Absalom filled with vengeance. Ecclesiastes 8-11 warns, "Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil." Third, reconciliation requires full commitment. David's half-hearted restoration of Absalom left his son vulnerable to rebellion. Colossians 3:13 calls us to forgive, as the Lord has forgiven you, a process that demands action, not avoidance. The story of Absalom's rebellion is a mirror for our own lives, reflecting the dangers of silence and the power of intentional leadership. As modern families, we can break the cycle of neglect by fostering open communication, addressing wrongdoing promptly, and pursuing reconciliation with humility. Deuteronomy 6-7 urges us to teach God's truths diligently, talking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. These moments of connection build trust, ensuring our homes are sanctuaries of grace. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning. This restoration is possible when we lead with courage, guided by God's wisdom. As we reflect on this chapter, let us consider the weight of our choices. David's silence fueled Absalom's rebellion, but we can choose to act, to speak, and to heal. By building homes rooted in vigilance, justice, and reconciliation, we can protect those entrusted to us from the storms of division. Proverbs 2:4-4 reminds us, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in silence, but in the pursuit of God's healing and unity, creating families that reflect His love and truth. How does a family, once broken by silence and rebellion, face the finality of loss when the consequences of inaction come full circle? Envision a king fleeing his own city, his heart heavy with the weight of a son's betrayal and the looming specter of divine judgment. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is not just a tale of personal tragedy, but a profound narrative of how a leader's failures can unravel a kingdom. As we enter this 8th chapter, we explore the tragic end of Absalom's rebellion, the deepening of David's grief, and the timeless lessons that urge us to confront our shortcomings with courage and faith. This account is a mirror, reflecting the fragility of family bonds and the power of restoration when guided by God's wisdom. If this journey resonates with you, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's silence and a son's defiance lead to irreparable loss, and what we can learn to protect our families from such devastation. The royal palace in Jerusalem, once a testament to David's divine favor, had become a battleground of betrayal and rebellion. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, David's silence in its aftermath, Absalom's vengeful murder of Amnon, and his subsequent exile and return had fractured the royal family beyond repair. Absalom's rebellion, as recorded in the 2nd book of Samuel 15, saw him declare himself king in Hebron. stealing the hearts of Israel with his charisma and cunning. To Samuel 15:6-10. David, forced to flee Jerusalem, wept as he ascended the Mount of Olives, his faith tested but unbroken. To Samuel 15:trained to Psalm 3:1-3. The rebellion was not just a political uprising, but the culmination of a family's unresolved pain, rooted in David's failure to act when Tamar needed justice and Absalom needed guidance. Now, the scriptures lead us to the tragic climax of this rebellion, where the cost of silence is paid in blood. The second book of Samuel 18 details the final confrontation between David's forces and Absalom's rebels in the forest of Ephraim. Despite his betrayal, David's heart remained that of a father. He instructed his commanders Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom." To Samuel 18:5. This plea reveals David's enduring love, a father's hope that his son might yet be spared. But the battle was fierce, and Absalom's fate was sealed by his own pride. The scriptures describe a moment, both dramatic and tragic. Absalom, riding his mule, was caught by his head in the branches of an oak tree, left hanging between heaven and earth. To Samuel 18:9. Joab, ever pragmatic, disregarded David's command and struck Absalom, killing him with 3 javelins through the heart, his men finishing the act. To Samuel 18:14-15. The rebellion was crushed, but at a cost. David could scarcely bear the death of his son. The news of Absalom's death reached David through a messenger, and the scriptures capture the raw agony of his response. The king was deeply moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." 2 Samuel 18:33. This lament, raw and unrestrained, echoes the depth of a father's love, even for a son who had betrayed him. David's grief was not just for Absalom's death, but for the chain of events that led to it. Events that began with his silence after Tamar's violation. As Psalm 34:18 declares, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." David's broken heart, laid bare in this moment, reflects the culmination of his failures as a father, failures that had now cost him 2 sons, and left Tamar desolate. This tragedy underscores the devastating consequences of unresolved conflict. David's silence after Tamar's violation allowed Absalom's vengeance to take root. His partial reconciliation upon Absalom's return fueled rebellion, and his failure to guide his son's charisma led to a fatal uprising. The scriptures warn in Galatians 6-7, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap." David sowed silence and inaction, reaping a harvest of division and death. Absalom's end, caught in the oak tree, is a haunting image of a life suspended between ambition and judgment, a son who could have been a leader but became a rebel. Proverbs 16:18 cautions, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Absalom's pride, fed by unresolved pain, led him to a fall from which there was no recovery. The narrative also highlights the role of leadership in preventing such tragedies. David's failures, lack of vigilance, inaction in crisis, and avoidance of reconciliation created a void that Absalom filled with rebellion. As a leader, David was called to shepherd his family as he shepherded Israel, yet he faltered. The scriptures teach us in 1 Timothy 3-5, "For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church?" Leadership begins at home, requiring discernment, courage, and commitment to justice. David's plea to deal gently with Absalom shows his love, but it came too late to undo the damage of years of neglect. As parents, we are called to act decisively, addressing wrongdoing and fostering an environment where love and accountability coexist. Psalm 127:1 reminds us, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." A house built on silence cannot stand. The death of Absalom also raises questions about the balance between justice and mercy. David's command to spare Absalom reflects a father's mercy, but Joab's decision to kill him prioritizes justice for the kingdom. The scriptures do not condone Joab's disobedience, but they reveal the complexity of leadership in crisis. Proverbs 21:15 states, "When justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers." David's failure to administer justice after Tamar's violation set the stage for Absalom's rebellion, and his leniency during the rebellion could not prevent its tragic end. As modern families, we must navigate this balance, ensuring that love does not excuse wrongdoing, but guides it toward restoration. Ephesians 6:4 instructs, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Discipline, tempered by love, builds a foundation for healing. This chapter of Tamar's story is a call to reflect on our own families. Are we sowing seeds of silence that could lead to division? Are we balancing justice and mercy in our leadership? The scriptures offer hope in Isaiah 61:3, promising a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning. This restoration is possible when we break the silence, confront conflict with courage, and seek God's guidance. David's lament for Absalom is a reminder that love alone is not enough. It must be paired with action. By fostering open communication, addressing wrongdoing promptly, and pursuing reconciliation, we can protect our homes from the cycles of strife that plagued David's house. Proverbs 24:3-4 declares, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." As we close this chapter, let us consider the weight of our choices. David's silence led to Absalom's rebellion and death, but we can choose to lead differently. By building homes rooted in vigilance, justice, and love, we can create sanctuaries where our loved ones thrive. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in the shadow of silence, but in the light of God's truth, forging families that reflect His grace and healing. What does it mean to stand amidst the ruins of a family, grappling with the weight of irreversible loss, yet still seeking a path to redemption? Envision a king, his heart shattered by the death of his son, his kingdom restored but his family forever broken. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is a profound testament to the devastating cost of silence and the enduring hope of restoration through God's grace. As we enter this 9th chapter, we explore David's return to Jerusalem after Absalom's death, the lingering shadow of Tamar's tragedy, and the lessons that compel us to rebuild our families with wisdom and courage. This narrative is not merely a historical account, but a clarion call, urging us to break the cycles of neglect and lead our homes with vigilance and love. If this journey stirs your soul, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's grief and a family's fracture can teach us to forge homes that reflect God's promise of healing. The royal palace in Jerusalem, once a beacon of David's divine favor, had been transformed into a monument of sorrow. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, David's silence in its aftermath, Absalom's vengeful murder of Amnon, his rebellion, and his tragic death in the forest of Ephraim, had left the royal family in ruins. To Samuel 18:14-15, David's lament, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom would I had died instead of you." 2 Samuel 18:33 echoed the depth of a father's love, but also the weight of his failures. The rebellion was crushed, and David returned to Jerusalem as king, but the cost was staggering. A daughter desolate, 2 sons dead, and a family irreparably divided. The scriptures now guide us through David's restoration to the throne and the lingering consequences of his silence, offering lessons that resonate with families today. The second book of Samuel 19 details David's return to Jerusalem, a moment of political triumph overshadowed by personal grief. Joab, the commander who had killed Absalom against David's orders, confronted the king's mourning, urging him to rise and lead. "You have made it clear today that commanders and servants are nothing to you. For today I know that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead, you would be pleased." To Samuel 19:6. Joab's blunt words forced David to set aside his grief and address the people, restoring order to the kingdom. To Samuel 19:8. Yet, the scriptures offer no mention of Tamar, no record of David seeking to comfort his daughter or address her ongoing suffering. Her desolation, as noted in 2 Samuel 13:20, remained a silent wound, a testament to the enduring impact of David's inaction. The palace, restored as the seat of power, could not reclaim the unity lost through years of neglect. David's return to Jerusalem marks a moment of reflection on the nature of leadership and redemption. The scriptures teach us in Psalm 32:5, a psalm attributed to David, "Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning." Yet, for David's family, the morning brought no joy, only the stark reality of loss. His failure to act after Tamar's violation, to discipline Amnon, to fully reconcile with Absalom, or to guide his children with vigilance, had led to this moment. The prophecy of Nathan, delivered after David's sin with Bathsheba, "The sword shall never depart from your house," to Samuel 12:10, had come to pass with chilling precision. Yet, this prophecy was not a sentence of despair but a warning, a call to lead with greater diligence. David's grief for Absalom was profound, but his failure to address the root causes of his family's collapse left wounds unhealed. This narrative highlights 3 enduring lessons for family leadership. First, vigilance is non-negotiable. David's inability to discern the dangerous dynamics within his household, Amnon's lust, Jonadab's cunning, Absalom's resentment allowed tragedy to unfold. Proverbs 27-23 instructs, "Know well the condition of your flocks, and give attention to your herds." As parents, we must know our children's hearts, addressing issues before they escalate into crises. Second, justice must be balanced with mercy. David's silence after Tamar's violation denied her justice, while his leniency toward Absalom failed to guide him toward righteousness. Ecclesiastes 8-11 warns, "Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil." Swift and righteous justice, tempered by love, prevents further harm. Third, reconciliation requires intentional effort. David's half-hearted restoration of Absalom fueled rebellion, and his failure to comfort Tamar left her desolate. Colossians 3:13 urges, "As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive." A process that demands action and humility. The absence of Tamar in the narrative, after her violation, is a poignant reminder of the cost of silence. Her life, once full of promise, was reduced to isolation in Absalom's house, her voice silenced by the very family meant to protect her. The scriptures do not record David reaching out to her, a silence that speaks volumes about the priorities of his leadership. Psalm 82-3-4 calls us to give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Tamar, afflicted and destitute, found no such justice in her father. This omission challenges us to consider the unseen members of our own families, those whose pain may be hidden but whose need for love and restoration is profound. As modern parents, we are called to create spaces where every voice is heard, where every wound is acknowledged, and where healing is pursued with diligence. The story also underscores the power of God's grace in the face of human failure. Despite David's shortcomings, the scriptures affirm his heart for God. His psalms, like Psalm 51-10, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me," reflect a man who sought forgiveness and restoration. Yet, his failure to extend this grace to his family highlights a critical truth: redemption begins at home. Ephesians 6:2-4 instructs, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Discipline and instruction, rooted in love, create an environment where redemption is possible. David's return to Jerusalem was a political victory, but without family restoration, it was incomplete. As families today, we can choose to prioritize healing, breaking the cycles of silence that threaten our homes. The tragedy of Tamar and Absalom is a mirror for our own lives, reflecting the dangers of neglect and the hope of restoration. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This promise is ours when we lead with courage, address wrongdoing promptly, and pursue reconciliation with humility. Proverbs 24:3-4 declares, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." Wisdom, not silence, builds homes that endure. By fostering open communication, balancing justice with mercy, and seeking God's guidance, we can protect our families from the fractures that plagued David's house. As we reflect on this chapter, let us consider the legacy we are building. David's silence led to loss, but we can choose to speak, to act, and to heal. The scriptures encourage us in Matthew 5-9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Peacemaking requires effort, but it yields a harvest of unity and love. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Jesus Speak Today as we continue this journey. May we move forward, not in the shadow of silence, but in the light of God's grace, creating families that reflect His promise of restoration and peace. What does it mean to rebuild from the ashes of a family broken by silence, seeking a legacy of healing and wisdom for generations to come? Picture a king, restored to his throne, yet forever marked by the loss of his children, standing at the crossroads of grief and redemption. The story of Tamar, David's only daughter, is not merely a chronicle of tragedy but a profound call to action, urging us to confront our failures, break the cycles of neglect, and build families rooted in God's truth. As we reach this 10th and final chapter, we reflect on David's legacy, the enduring lessons from Tamar's tragedy, and the practical steps we can take to protect our homes from similar devastation. This narrative is a mirror, reflecting both the fragility of human leadership and the hope of divine restoration. If this journey has stirred your heart, I invite you to like this content, subscribe to the Jesus Speak Today channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us uncover how a father's silence, a daughter's pain, and a son's rebellion can guide us toward homes filled with love, vigilance, and grace. The royal palace in Jerusalem, once a symbol of David's divine anointing, had become a testament to the cost of silence. The violation of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, David's failure to act, Absalom's vengeful murder of Amnon, his rebellion, and his tragic death in the forest of Ephraim had left the royal family in ruins. To Samuel 18:14-15, David's return to Jerusalem restored his kingship, but the wounds of his family remained unhealed. To Samuel 19:8. Tamar, desolate in Absalom's house, 2 Samuel 13:20, is a silent figure in the aftermath, her suffering a haunting reminder of the consequences of inaction. Absalom's death, met with David's heart-wrenching lament, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you." Thus Samuel 18:33 marked the culmination of a tragedy that began with a father's silence. Yet, the scriptures offer more than a tale of loss. They provide a roadmap for redemption, a call to lead our families with wisdom and courage. David's life, as recorded in the scriptures, is a paradox of triumph and failure. He was a man after God's own heart, 1 Samuel 13:14, whose psalms, like Psalm 23, proclaim a God who leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. Yet, in his own household, David wandered through a valley of his own making, blinded by the demands of his kingdom and the weight of his past sins. The prophecy of Nathan, delivered after David's sin with Bathsheba, "The sword shall never depart from your house," to Samuel 12:10, unfolded with devastating precision, claiming Amnon, Absalom, and the dignity of Tamar. But this prophecy was not a sentence of despair. It was a warning, a call to greater vigilance. David's failure to heed this call through vigilance, justice, and reconciliation led to a legacy marred by loss. Yet, his life also points to God's grace, as seen in Psalm 30 minutes and 11 seconds to 12. "You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent." This promise of restoration is the heartbeat of this story, offering hope for families today. The tragedy of Tamar and Absalom reveals 4 critical lessons for family leadership. First, vigilance is the cornerstone of protection. David's failure to discern the dangerous dynamics within his household, Amnon's obsession, Jonadab's cunning, Absalom's resentment allowed tragedy to unfold. Proverbs 22:3 warns, "The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it." As parents, we must be watchful, knowing our children's hearts and addressing issues before they escalate. Second, justice must be swift and righteous. David's silence after Tamar's violation denied her justice and emboldened Absalom's vengeance. Ecclesiastes 8:11 cautions, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Justice, tempered by love, prevents further harm. Third, reconciliation requires intentional effort. David's half-hearted restoration of Absalom fueled rebellion, and his failure to comfort Tamar left her desolate. Colossians 3:13 urges, "As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive," a process that demands humility and action. Fourth, Communication is the lifeblood of a family. The absence of open dialogue in David's household created a void filled by destructive impulses. Deuteronomy 6-7 instructs, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." These lessons translate into practical steps for modern families. First, establish regular moments for dialogue. Family meals, shared activities, and times of prayer or reflection create spaces where children feel heard and valued. Second, develop a family safety plan. Know your children's friends, set clear boundaries for internet and social media use, and maintain open channels for addressing concerns. Third, seek preventive support. Just as we consult doctors for physical health, a family counselor can help identify and resolve issues before they escalate. Fourth, strengthen family bonds through shared traditions, celebrating milestones, creating memories, and fostering a sense of unity. Proverbs 24:3-4 declares, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." These steps, rooted in Scripture, build homes that withstand the storms of life. The story of Tamar is a sobering reminder that no family is immune to failure, not even one led by a man after God's own heart. David's silence left Tamar desolate, Amnon dead, Absalom a rebel, and his kingdom shaken. Yet, the Scriptures offer hope beyond the tragedy. Isaiah 61:3 promises a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This promise is not for perfect families but for vigilant ones, willing to break the silence and act with courage. David's Psalms, like Psalm 147:3, he heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds, reflect a God who restores what is broken. As modern families, we can claim this promise by leading with wisdom, addressing wrongdoing promptly, and pursuing reconciliation with humility. The legacy of David's family is a cautionary tale, but it is also an invitation to choose a different path. We are not bound by the failures of the past. We are empowered by God's grace to build anew. Matthew 7:24-25 teaches, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock." By grounding our families in God's truth through vigilance, justice, reconciliation, and communication, we can build homes that endure. The tragedy of Tamar need not be our story. We can be agents of change, breaking the silence that destroys and fostering the love that heals. As we close this final chapter, let us reflect on the legacy we are crafting. David's silence led to loss, but we can choose to speak, to act, and to restore. The Scriptures call us in James 1:22 to be doers of the word, and not hearers only. Let us be doers, parents who listen, leaders who act, and families who love with the strength of God's grace. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, perhaps reflecting on how this story has challenged you to lead your family differently. Subscribe to Jesus Speak today to continue this journey of truth and transformation. May we move forward, not in the shadow of silence, but in the light of God's promise, building families that reflect His love, wisdom, and healing. Let us break the silence and embrace the restoration that awaits.